Thing you didn't say explicitly was, but we might talk about that, you know, for a community, that someone considering an action that would be, might result in a long sentence, that reassurance to that person that we can cover. You know, that's a part of people being free, like they were at the Catholic Worker, to go. When they were done, if they made that risk, if it turned out that they stayed in jail an indeterminate amount of it, they still had a place. They weren't gonna you know, lose their place to stay. The work was gonna go on. Things weren't gonna collapse. People were gonna step up. People are going to step up and take care of things because they share in your mission by doing that. So it's not just the person who goes and takes the step but it's the rest of the community has to step up, has to say, yes, you know, you've got a place when you come back. I know when we had people in our community preparing for plowshares, at one time when we lived in Davenport, you know, that was a big issue, that, you know, that they knew their kids had a place to stay, that the community was going to go on, that whatever, however long their trial and everything went on, that we're going to do our best to hold things together for them.
And that's, I just want to say that going to prison in our situation, I said it is privileged, and our experience is, there's a way, even if you're there for months or years, that our experience is we are there in solidarity with the others. And we, as Dorothy said, the only way to really do the work of mercy visiting the prisoner is to be one yourself. But our experience is so different. And again, at times I've been in jails and prisons where I cannot help but hear the telephone conversations of other people, young men trying to, you know, talk to their kids and discipline their kids over the phone with the recording keep going on. This call is from a federal prison. And I could see in their faces when that recording would come on, and how, you know, and just when the Democratic, Kathy and I were arrested in Des Moines on the Democratic caucuses where Barack Obama, we were arrested in Barack Obama's campaign office. We beat the rush. And it was a day, it was like 20 below zero, one of the coldest days it could be in Iowa. And in the holding cell I was in, there's a telephone that you can call, collect out, and they've got the numbers for bail bondsmen next to them. And I had everything worked out with my family, with my job. I had days off. I was ready. I was able to block that off. And there was a man in the cell with me who was frantic because he was picked up on a traffic charge and stopped in a traffic stop, and the computer came up with an unpaid fine. He insisted that he had paid, and he was in the jail cell, and he was on his way to pick up his daughter, who was staying after school, and it was 20 below zero, and his daughter was waiting outside, and he was frantically trying to get on the phone, and his daughter's out in the cold and feeling abandoned, and he's trying to find somebody, call and collect from a jail, you know, pick up my daughter, make sure she's all right. And I thought, you know, what can I do? What can I do for this guy? Except be there with him. But being there with him is not nothing. But I can't say that my plight was comparable to that. I was going into the prison as a, you know,
Volunteer.
as a volunteer almost.
Well, to continue your discussion of privilege and academia and learning, you know, as an academic and a sociologist, I could cite all the statistics about the poor going to prison, but I didn't really get it until, and I've never done prison time, just diddly jail sentences and things like that. But I once was convicted in Albany and given a choice between a $200 fine and 15 days in jail. And so I took the 15 days in jail. And I was on a visiting position at Union College, and all the faculty thought I was clinically insane. None of them could imagine that you would not just pay $200 to, but then when you got into the jail cell, you're talking with people about your court cases and things like that, and to a man, everyone I met in the jail said, yeah, $200, 15 days, I'd have taken the 15 days. That it was a rational economic calculation to the people who were in jail, when it was just utter lunacy to my colleagues.
Perspective.
John and then.
Yeah, when I hear about this privilege, I don't find many people in my community who would think of going to jail as a privilege. And the one thing I never really hear talked about is fear, because if we actually want to fill prisons with political prisoners, resistors, then somehow we have to help people overcome their fear. You and I, we've been at the Nevada test site. It's a ritual arrest. It's a safe arrest as you can ever have in your entire life. And yet, a lot of people stand on the far side of the line out of fear, even though with certainty, almost 99.999% certainty, nothing is going to happen to you except you'll be released in an hour and a half. And yet, there is a great amount of fear. If we don't somehow talk about fear, and I've never heard it spoken of in activist circles like us right now.
The fear?
Fear. The people in this room who haven't been arrested, I don't know if there is any. I have no idea who has. Well, I know a lot of people have. But, normally fear is one of the things, and it's fear of losing your job, fear of, one of my fears, even though on occasion I risk a risk, is I don't want to lose my Social Security because I don't have anything to pay my bills. So it's fear of losing your job or your income, very real fear. In my case, I'm untested in prison for any length of time at all, because actually for all my political arrests, I haven't even done an overnight in jail. For political arrest, I did one overnight once for being drunk, but but not for a political arrest. And so another issue related to fear is anger. And how will I do in jail or prison if I do find myself there? And so I think I don't know where this discussion should go with most people. But fear and anger and loss of income are three really big things that keep people on the other side of the line. And frankly, fear holds our society in place. And in reference to the Poor People's Campaign, which is very discouraging to me in my own community, because I've been told in more than one meeting, for example, that black people cannot be arrested because they're too much at risk. And it's the white people's turn. And, and I actually bristle at that suggestion, because it is an insult to all of the black people in the original civil rights movement who were at risk, the most at risk, who took this tremendous risk and stood up and made the thing work. And because they had this tremendous courage, white people joined in, but it was that kind of courage that inspired compassion, love, decency and, some integrity that brought it out of us. And now there's this kind of reversal. So in Albany, for example, many of the people who were arrested were old white people, some of which are in this room. And it was, it's part of the wrong, I think that's part of the wrong approach, because if we aren't all in it together, we're not going to succeed. We need our black brothers and sisters to be with us, and we need to be with them. And we need to stop the fragmentation that Arun mentioned in his presentation yesterday. And so there is while the Poor People's Campaign was really exciting, and I encouraged people, of our coalition to really join in, and they did. Thank you, Paul and Peg and others. In some ways, it shot itself in the foot, too, for some of its contextual framing. And that was, again, based out of fear, so if we really want to fill these jails, we need to start discussing fear in a real way and explain the privilege in a way that can be understood from the far side of the line.
Yeah. Well, I just real briefly on the issue of fear, it's been one thing we've said I've heard even this weekend here, is that we catch courage from each other. And that's courage is something that we don't have alone. Even if people aren't physically with us, we have courage because we have support of other people. And in religious terms, prayers or solidarity or something, we can't be doing any of this by ourselves. Paul was...
One of the messages over this weekend and elsewhere has been the issue of intentionality and making clear decisions. And I would really like, if possible, here and now, to hear from the under 40 crowd here. There are a few people in the room that don't need naps in the afternoon, as I kind of look at the world. And I would really want to encourage those that are under 40 to speak, and those that are over 40 to listen for a few minutes. I just offer that as an option and a hope that we would be intentional, and if it's uncomfortable to the under 30 to be put on the spot, so be it. But this is a wonderful time to speak, and I think the over 30 crowd can learn a lot about these important issues from listening. Thank you, Vincent.
I'm making his point too, but, a great feminist once said that you can measure the power in any society by watching who speaks and who listens. So, that's a very good point. We've seen a lot of that this weekend, which I find interesting. But I wanted to ask you, who made that decision?
I don't know.
About, was it white people?
Was
Was it African-American people? Because I feel like...
Well, in one of the meetings, an African-American minister stood up and made that pronouncement. In other meetings, it was white people who were saying to me, correcting me for having, suggested that we should all be arrested together if we think that's a good idea, that black people couldn't take the risk because they were more at risk. And I said, well, I don't agree, and presented the fact of the original civil rights movement and how that worked, and how we need to be together.
Just wondering, the whole question to me is about power. So.
Is any...
I guess, I kind of wanted to just talk to this a little bit and maybe wandering a little bit, having different ideas. It seems like a lot of people previously who went to jail had often spoke about Phil Berrigan as being somebody who was influential on them and the charisma. And, I think it's really important to emphasize the support that is so essential. Like, I feel that is what enables people then to go into the jails, and that is often overlooked within going to jails. was invited to be part of a process in which people were really looking at trying to figure out how to fill the jails with people I know kind of associated with Catholic Worker, taking on just bold actions in these times. And I lament that I didn't join in that process, and some of it was my own fears, struggling with how to go out and be with these organizations, but also some of it was just a lot of the painfulness of having to struggle with sexism, racism in these conversations, and how draining those conversations get to be, and trying to create a new way of approaching, a new way of going forward. And so the invitation came from white men in their 40s who were, just uncertain about how to proceed forward, and just lamenting just the ways of the world, and wanting to have a new way of going forward, but also understanding how racism, sexism, homophobia, and all of this comes in. Brian was talking about Dorothy Day and how she came to him as a young person and asking his opinion. I think that wanting to hear more from the elders, of asking young people, what are your thoughts on this? It came up over the weekend. Young people go to these elders in your midst and gather their stories, and it's like, and I have such respect for my elders. Like, anybody who knows me knows that that is something dear to my heart. But I think needing to have some of the older people not having this sense, I feel like some of it may be generational. Some of it is all of us wanting to make the world a better place than the one we inherited it. And I think I see a real need for the older generation to really have conversations amongst yourself about the grief of what is being left to future generations, and not putting that on future generations.
You're saying we didn't do a good job?
I'm saying every generation, yes. I mean, I sense that from the elders, and it shouldn't be coming to the younger people. In terms of in having animosity, because especially with the racism, it's so alive amongst so many people, and there's a sense of urgency amongst young people of wanting to get it right. And I don't think it's a lack of recognition of the work that has been done before us, but it's a new time. There's new dynamics at play, and so to say we've done this work before and not enter into the conversations and into the classrooms of learning together, I think is a disservice to all of us. And the impact that it has is because us as white people are not doing this work that needs to be done amongst each other, and it's impacting how we show up and for communities of color.
Sing it, sister.
So a little wandering, but I think though that the importance of support in doing this work, I didn't join in this invitation, and it's heavy on my heart, and part of it felt that not having community around me. And so, I mean, I feel like I feel the importance of going to jail, but I think that how that support, how we know there's coverage is still something that it needs to be worked out. Yeah, maybe that's just more for me personally, but I think, and having done support for Carl Cabot and the work that he does, and it takes on something, and I love it, and I love what he does in Kansas City in the Interdependence Day. But the irony to me sometimes too is it can't be a one-person revolution unless you're just, in the words of Saul Alinsky, making sure that your moral, ethical hymen remains intact. If that's your intent and your motivation, great. But that's not why I'm doing it.
I was on it, Chrissy referenced a conversation I told her about I had with Dorothy Day. I'll just share that now. When I was 19 years old and arrived in New York, one of the first days I was there, when I met Dorothy Day, she sat me down, we had tea together, and she grilled me about myself. Not so much about myself, what I thought about things, and it was very, in one sense, in another sense it was exhilarating, because here this woman, I was 19, she was 79, I had done nothing, been nowhere, and she'd done everything and been everywhere. And she was asking me about things I was clueless about, completely. She was asking me about the war in Cambodia, and about the farm workers and the grape strike, and what I thought about the efforts for a nuclear non-proliferation treaty, and all this stuff. And in one sense, I felt she was putting me on the spot, and I had very little to say about any of those things back then.